All right, folks. So our first step here is to always check for a GCF. Even though we're going to learn a new method today, we always want to start out by checking for a GCF. So we look at these first three terms and we ask ourselves, is there anything in common with 2x squared, negative 7x, or positive 6? In this case, there's no number at all that's in common or variable. So there is no GCF. But just because there wasn't one doesn't mean we shouldn't check. So once we've checked for our GCF, we're now going to move on to our second method for factoring a trinomial. In this case, it's called the AC method. And the reason we call it the AC method is because these three numbers, the 2 and the 6, are the letters A and C. So we're going to label these A and C. So not the X's, just the numbers themselves. So 2 and positive 6 are the A and the C value. Now in the middle, we actually have our B value. So the number above, or the number in the middle rather, is the B value, negative 7. So it's really important to get started by identifying those three numbers, A, B, and C, because we'll need to use them throughout this method. All right, so step number one. First thing to do in the AC method is to actually multiply the A and the C values together. So in this case, we're going to identify my A and C. They're 2 and 6. So 2 times 6 gives us 12. Okay. And now that we have our 12, we're now going to take that number 12 and we're going to, step 2, list all the factor pairs of 12. Remember, factor pairs are numbers that multiply to 12. So numbers like 1 and 12, numbers like 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And you might think that that's all of our factor pairs, but we actually have to consider the negative factor pairs as well. So negative 1, negative 12, negative 2, negative 6, and negative 3, negative 4. All right. Later on, as you get good at this process, you won't actually have to list all of those. But for now, we want to start out by listing all those factor pairs. Once you've listed all your factor pairs, step 3 is going to be to find which of these factor pairs actually adds up. Which of these factor pairs adds to your B value? So if we look at this right here, 1 plus 12 gives me 13. 2 plus 6 gives me 8. 3 plus 4 gives me 7, which is close, but we don't want 7. We want negative 7. So not him either. Not those, not that one, but here we are. Negative 7 and, negative 3 and negative 4. Those, if we add them together, equal negative 7. So that's our factor pair that we want. All right, next step. Once we've got that factor pair, we're now going to rewrite our polynomial. Okay, so I'm going to give myself a little more space here. Now that we've got our factor pair, let's go ahead and get rid of this right here. Our factor pair, remember, is negative 3 and negative 4. So I'll rewrite that up here at the top as well. Okay, just as our little reminder. So negative 3 times negative 4 equals 12, but negative 3 plus negative 4 equals negative 7. All right, so back to step 4. Step 4 is to rewrite our polynomial. Now, what I want you to see is that our polynomial, actually, the first term and the last term stay exactly the same. 2x squared stays the same, and positive 6 stays the same. What changes is our middle term, and the middle term is split into those two factor pairs that we found earlier, negative 3x and negative 4x. So that's step 4, is to rewrite your polynomial using those two terms in the middle. Step 5 is we're now going to factor out a GCF from the left side and the right side. So the first thing we got to do is establish our left and right side. So draw a little line between your terms. Make sure you don't cover up the negative sign because we don't want to forget that that's negative. So now that we've done that, we're going to ask ourselves, what is the GCF of these two terms? And then later, what's the GCF of these two terms? So if we start out on the left side, what is the GCF of 2x squared minus 3x? In this case, they don't have a number in common, but they do have an x in common. Then we write our parentheses, just like we learned x, the GCF goes in front of the parentheses. Over here, what's our GCF of -4 and +6? Remember that we talked about if your first term is negative, your GCF has to be negative. And the only number that goes into both 4 and 6 is the number 2. Parentheses again. Now we actually divide. So if we were to divide right here, if we divide by x, divide by x, divide by -2, divide by -2, if we actually divide, what's left over? In this case, 2x squared divided by x gives us 2x, and -3x divided by x gives us -3. On our last one, -4x divided by -2 gives us 2x again, and 6 divided by -2 gives us -3. And you should notice something. You should notice that this binomial and this binomial are exactly the same. That's intentional. All right, our last step is to now rewrite the binomials. And here's how we write our binomials. Our binomials come from the GCFs and from the repeat binomial. So this is the binomial, I call this the GCF binomial, and I call this the repeat binomial. So the GCF binomial is comprised of your two GCFs, your first GCF here and your second GCF. So let's drag those in. First GCF is x, second GCF is -2. Our last binomial is the repeat binomial, which is comprised of these two binomials together. We just write them one time, 2x minus 3. And there you go. That is the factored form of our trinomial. And that is the most important skill that you will learn in high school algebra. All right, good luck as you practice.